Hello. I often get asked by people, how do you know that God really loves you? How do you know that He really cares for you? Well, I've had two recent examples of how God cares. About 3 weeks ago, we had a children's club in our church, and during one of the sessions, I was sitting watching what was going on when I had a text message. And when I looked at it, it was my goddaughter. And she said, "Urgent prayers needed for Daddy. He's been taken very poorly." Now, they were travelling in France, and I knew that Mark had not long recovered from a heart attack. So I began to pray very hard straight away. And at an opportune moment, we stopped the children's club and we all prayed. The children prayed for Mark, and then we carried on. I got another text a few minutes later saying, "Please pray hard. Daddy's in an ambulance and I'm with him and I can't speak any French." So again, we prayed very hard. And I had another text and Isabella said, "This can be the only ambulance in France with an English-speaking paramedic. Pray for Mummy. She's driving the car behind into the hospital." Well, I'm glad to say that Mark was fine. Mark was fine. He spent a whole day in the hospital and they discovered what the matter was, and he was fine. And just the other day I went to have coffee with them to see how they all were, and Lisa told me what had happened. They had been in a remote area of France, driving, having a lovely time, when all of a sudden Mark became really poorly. And he became poorly very quickly. So he pulled over and Lisa managed to pull him into the passenger seat, and she drove the car into a lay-by because they were in a single road. And then all of a sudden, an ambulance pulled in to the lay-by. And Isabella quickly got out and she said to them, "Will you come and see my daddy?" And they came and they saw to him and they saw that he was in difficulty, and they took them to the hospital in Brest. They hadn't been on a call, they hadn't called them out, they didn't know what to dial for the emergency services. That ambulance just arrived at the right place at the right time when they just needed it. God had supplied their need. And just this Thursday, Hugh had a funeral to do, and it was a very hot day, and off he set to the crematorium. And a bit later on, I had a phone call to say, "Elizabeth, I've got to the crem, but I've forgotten my notes. Can you bring them to me?" Well, I knew the time of the funeral, and I knew I could just about get there. So I drove as quickly as the speed limit would allow. And I got to a certain point, and then, horror of horrors, I saw in front of me, up a hill, a mile-long line of traffic. And I thought, oh no, goodness me, I'm never going to get to the crematorium in time. So I began to pray as hard as I've ever prayed. "Lord, you know Hugh needs these notes. You know the time of the funeral. Please, can you get me there?" And we crawled along. There were three-way traffic lights because of the HS2 roadworks that were going on. I got through the roadworks and then I drove as fast as I could up to the crematorium, and I screeched in, a bit like Lewis Hamilton on his F1 escapades. And I just drove in as quickly, and I found myself driving behind the hearse. The hearse went one way and I went the other way towards Hugh and the mourners, and I opened the window and I put the notes out of the window, and Hugh took them just at the time when the coffin was being taken out of the hearse. God had got me there exactly on time, even though my little heart was racing 9 to the dozen. And then when Hugh got home, he told me that the undertaker had apologised to him for being 10 minutes late. There'd been some confusion at the house and they'd arrived 10 minutes late. But those 10 minutes were exactly the length of time I needed to get Hugh's notes to him so that he could do this funeral in a way that was pleasing to the mourners and to God. God was so gracious. He met our need to the very minute. That's how God loves you and me. He cares for you and me. Whenever we need him, he is there. We can pray at any time of day or night, and he hears us. And if we're praying prayers according to his will, he will answer them. Sometimes he will say, well, we need to wait a minute before we get the answer to that prayer. It's not the right time to answer that prayer. Sometimes he'll say, what you're asking is not good for you. So the answer is no. But when the chips are down and we need him, and that prayer is what he's wanting us to pray, he will be there for us. In Psalm 145 it says this: the Lord is near to all who call on him, to all who call on him in truth. And again in Acts 17 it says, reach out for God and find him, though he is not far from each one of us. You see, for Lisa and Isabella and Mark, he was at hand in that ambulance. For me and for Hugh and those mourners, he was there in that extra 10 minutes. God cares enough for you and me, and his timing is absolutely perfect. Give him a go and see. Take care. Bye-bye.